Okay, so we got Moses and Yahweh, the Passover, Christ, ego rebirth, and the age of Aquarius. Okay, so the Passover is when Yahweh took the firstborn of every Egyptian. The Passover ends up affecting Yahweh in the future when he must sacrifice his son for man's spiritual salvation. The firstborn represents the old ego and the old you. The death of the ego in the Passover symbolically represents the old you or ego before you unconsciously identify with the self. Once you do this, you go from a firstborn to a secondborn state. You are reborn. One thing to also understand is that the sacrifice of the firstborn was a normal practice among many tribes as a sacrifice to redeem the father and mother for their previous sins in other cultures and religions. For 40 days or years is known as the chemical opus. And 40 days is symbolic to the Egyptians' embalming process, and it signifies the transition between ego and the eternal self, or rebirth. One needs to learn how to let the self guide the ego. You are not ever alone. Your higher self is always with you. Don't let your ego hide the self's voice. The ego must be humble, in a humble state of darkness and need before it can perceive the dim light of the transpersonal psyche. We are cut off from the divine experience until we allow the light to come in. And now we enter the wilderness, which is where America is today. We need to learn to stay in the here and the now. Worrying about the future is our disease. The Hebrews first came upon water that was bitter, and the bitterness is where we will begin. We all admit that things are bad now, so we can get ourselves out of the present to fix a future that will never come, and therefore we never improve. The future begins from what is, and a future cannot be sound if it grows out of a morbid soul. So, if we do not feel this here and now, we build a sickly future. Make every moment the best it can be. Make every moment eternal. So next I will take you into the psychological journey of the wilderness. We are in the wilderness right now, so how do we get out of the wilderness and change into that second rebirth? This is also symbolic of the age of Aquarius, for the sign has powers in science and technology, but also an opening for deep spiritual enlightenment. The suffering that many of us have faced during this year will continue until you see the light. You will suffer these next 10 years until you learn to surrender to your higher power, your higher self. Those that have learned this lesson will be spared the suffering. If you accept love and forgiveness and embrace a new enlightened life, all of this suffering will end. Oddly, this has kind of like been my life's work, or what I've been studying since I was like 17. So what is next? Well, before I jump to astrology, I'm going to do the sun in Libra. I plan on doing a video on socialism versus unitivism, which is going to include a part from Slaughterhouse 5 that I'm going to talk about, that I never thought would come into play in my lifetime, but it has, and so I feel like I need to explain it. And then I want to do one of those dream videos where I tell about one of my dreams and interpret it. And then I'm going to do another future video where I kind of show the timeline of the chaos, especially some things that are about to happen. And, you know, all that can be taken away if you just kind of like surrender to your higher power and just kind of like let them be the guide. It's just learning to just let go, because you know that you have no control, and it's only when you learn that you have no control that you actually have control. And I know that probably sounds confusing. And you're gonna face, like, everything that you've been taught is gonna unfold as a lie, and you're gonna see it. And once you decide to make that decision to, you know, accept that everything that you've been taught is a lie, it's only when you're really going to be able to allow to learn for yourself. So, after all that, I want to leave you with this one question. How much must you lose before you surrender yourself to your higher power? I hope you do not have to face it. I don't really like people going through pain. But keep it in mind these next 10 years, because it's just that simple. But consciousness is changing, and we're guiding the way in which consciousness is going to change for quite some time. Do we want to continue this path of brutality and suffering, or do we want to choose a more enlightened path? And that choice is up to us. So, I hope that you enjoyed this, and be on the lookout for those other videos, and peace out, and have a good one.